For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh, Revi, and you're watching The Gist. A warm welcome to all our viewers who are joining, no matter where you are and what time of the hour, wherever you are on our stream. We're also welcoming for the first time to StratNews Global's platform from Jakarta in Indonesia. Mohammed Waffaa Kharisma is a researcher with the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, in Indonesia. Waffaa, thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Hi, Amitabh. I'm really glad to be here. It's a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
I've had a lot of top-level visits to Indonesia over the last week or 10 days. The Indian Deputy National Security Advisor Pankaj Saran was there, and he had top-level meetings. You had the Secretary of the Russian National Security Advisory Board, also Nikolay Patrushev, and then, of course, Secretary of State Blinken. But since it's India and Indonesia, I want to start with, in terms of the Deputy NSA, our Deputy NSA visiting there, reports suggesting that they would be talking about increased defense cooperation apart from radicalization and other things. That's the reports that came out. India and Indonesia, Waffaa, I mean, the relations over time, how would you say they've developed?
Well, we do have a lot of common things, a lot of common values, a lot of common history, and a lot of similarities with one another. But again, the general sense is that this relationship has been quite underexplored at times, because there's a lot of similarities. Probably the concern would be we are too similar with one another. So that could also mean that there's a lot less things to complement one another. But, talking about Indo-Pacific and the future, there's really need to step up with a lot of corporations just to balance things out with all this major power competition, great power competition narrative going on. India is one of the major powers that we've been looking to collaborate a lot, and we really look forward to a step up in bilateral ties with India, of course.
This stepping up in terms of defense cooperation, what really is Indonesia looking for?
Well, with India, obviously, we do share a lot of maritime interest, especially with the Indian Ocean. Again, we do share a lot of values. So often officials talk about how India and Indonesia is similar in that we value international law like UNCLOS. So we do seek to cooperate a lot more in that field, and especially with how things are going in the Indian Ocean, we do fear the same thing of the incoming competition, arms race, submarine competition, potential conflicts, and flashpoints. So we do share that. But at the moment, a lot of these things that we can work up is on that maritime domain awareness cooperation, just those practical cooperation from patrols to increasing knowledge sharing and capacity building. Between our closest territories, and we have Sumatra, you have Nicobar and Andaman. Usually those are the areas that we talk a lot about with regards to cooperation between India and Indonesia and that strategic ties.
Waffaa, again, specifically though, it's been quite several years, I think, when there's been talk of a third-party export of the India-Russia developed supersonic missile, the Brahmos. Philippines has been one of them. Indonesia has been another. In Southeast Asia, we've heard Vietnam as well, Gulf and South American countries expressing, interest in that system. Anything you hear on that developing front on the Brahmos?
Well, for Indonesia, I think those kind of, initiative would be a bit more sensitive in our side because we don't really want to look to choose certain system over another because we really, I think our officials really don't want to look like we're antagonizing or countering other countries when we're working with certain specific countries in particular. And these kind of systems are usually geopolitically quite suggestive in that sense. So I think Indonesia is on the more careful side on this sort of initiative, while of course our other neighbors are really get going with these things. But Indonesia, I think we're a little bit more careful to not antagonize any one country.
You mentioned the connectivity maritime domain, and of course, Indonesia. If you look at the tips of Indonesia and the tip of Indian territory, they are so close together. I mean, much closer
Exactly.
than Thailand or Malaysia or any other of the other Southeast Asian countries. There was some kind of talk about the Sabang port as well, and how India would help in developing that. Has there been any movement over the years?
Well, I recall there was, I think there was in 2018, there was a deep sea port joint initiative in Sabang that was agreed with India, between India and Indonesia. And I do see that there's a lot of experience to be shared between India and Indonesia in terms of investment and interconnectivity projects. But in terms of just implementation, I think we get, I think, a lot of track lost because of the pandemic. So I'm not quite so sure as to where the progress is in terms of implementation in that sort of initiatives. But that's exactly the front that we need to stress on, because I think our government is really putting emphasis on infrastructure, interconnectivity, drawing investments as that front of practical cooperation with a lot of our major partners.
We're seeing that map there, which illustrates how close India and Indonesia really are. If you could just flesh out that part of the cooperation between India and Indonesia, or the potential for cooperation in terms of, not only Sabang port, but connectivity through the maritime route, trade.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing that the trend here, going to the future, just talking to officials, especially with our from the official ministries coordinating Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Investment, we do see a lot of interest in taking practical cooperations between regions that is close to one another. And I mean, it's really interesting to have a region, as close to between India and Indonesia, but not having a lot of interaction between one another. So connectivity is a lot of things, but just these regions close to another is really a front that we need to start with. I think that's the interest going forward.
Sabang, again, you said because of the pandemic, possibly lots of initiatives have, if not stalled, they've been slowed down. But how does Indonesia view Sabang port in terms of Indian collaboration? It will, of course, be open to ships, both trade or maritime and naval ships from all countries. And you were talking about sensitivities in the region as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Indonesia would likely frame it as one of many joint initiatives, like deep sea ports that we need. So Sabang is just one. So that would really likely put less sensitivities to this sort of engagement. But I think that over the course of the relationship, I think we will see a lot more of these initiatives and a lot more connectivity projects. So that's all I think I can say about this.
Sure. And in terms of, there was also a kickstart to, say, the Indonesia-Australia trilateral to step it up in a ministerial level. But that also seems to have slowed down. Or do you see any movement on that? And what is Indonesia's interest in a trilateral like that?
Right. So we've really been exploring a lot of trilaterals, because minilaterals are probably the trends, just collective, like-minded countries trying to tackle a common problem together. But the thing with Indonesia and India, with work with Russia, a trilateral, or a trilateral with Australia, for instance, usually for our officials, there's not a lot of common, interest in a practical interest. Because when we talk about trilateral, we have Indonesia have trilateral with Malaysia and Singapore, for instance. We have an exact common maritime boundary area that we share. So there's an actual area that we share together, and the presence of this area is what drives these countries together. And there's a lot of hesitance when it comes to trilaterals that has no exact areas of interest or even physical ones that exist. So I think that's where the challenge lies. And again, I think I see that our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with how the situation is, that they're overstretched with meetings, overstretched with, we have disasters a lot. India also have problems, and this sort of I think limitations also limits the possibilities of these trilaterals.
Well, of course, the big visit was the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken to Jakarta. He's also in Malaysia, Thailand as well on his Southeast Asia visit. Just want to play out a soundbite from his speech when he was outlining the U.S. Indo-Pacific policy at the university in Jakarta.
We'll work with our allies and partners to defend the rules-based order that we built together over decades to ensure the region remains open and accessible. And let me be clear about one thing. The goal of defending the rules-based order is not to keep any country down. Rather, it's to protect the right of all countries to choose their own path, free from coercion, free from intimidation. It's not about a contest between a US-centric region or a China-centric region. The Indo-Pacific is its own region. Rather, it's about upholding the rights and agreements that are responsible for the most peaceful and prosperous period this region and the world has ever experienced. That's why there's so much concern, from Northeast Asia to Southeast Asia, and from the Mekong River to the Pacific Islands, about Beijing's aggressive actions, claiming open seas as their own, distorting open markets through subsidies to its state-run companies, denying the exports or revoking deals for countries whose policies it does not agree with, engaging in illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing activities. Countries across the region want this behavior to change. We do too. That's why we're determined to ensure freedom of navigation in the South China Sea, where Beijing's aggressive actions there threaten the movement of more than $3 trillion worth of commerce every year.
The Secretary of State's speech there was much awaited. He's enunciating well-known points or policy structures of the U.S. Indo-Pacific, which India sees its Indo-Pacific strategy as very different. It's more inclusive than the U.S. But how does Indonesia see Secretary of State Blinken's visit, especially in light of what you were calling sensitivities or balancing or dealing with an aggressive China all across the world?
I mean, I agree with you, Amitabh, that this speech is a bit more nuanced. I think he's put it really exactly with the position of a lot of countries in Southeast Asia, with our sensitivities that we don't want to choose sides, that we don't want to be stuck in the great power competition between a US-dominated region and a Chinese-dominated region. And I do see that he emphasized that he doesn't want the US doesn't want to put any country down in their effort. But again, we do still see that for Indonesia, that there is this, duality, that there's a fight, or I think a struggle to the future between those that fight for freedom, the free world, and then those that repress it, that tries to fracture it. And I think this kind of dualism, this kind of divides, I think a lot of countries in Southeast Asia would less likely to buy wholly, I think, and comfortably even, because of the diverse nature of the region. But we do, I think, from what Biden say in Jakarta, a lot more of what will ring with the Indonesian government lies in, I think, that last third of his speech, where he talks a lot about infrastructure, initiative and vaccines, because those things ring more true with Southeast Asia, because the democracies or ideals or with freedoms currently doesn't feed the next man or cure the next man. This substance about vaccine and productions and infrastructure investment are those that our government currently are into. So those are the things that maybe ring more with the Indonesian government.
Very interesting that Secretary of State Blinken also acknowledged that when he got off the plane in Jakarta, he almost saw the shadow of the Russian NSA's plane there. Nikolay Patrushev also meeting top officials there. And in light of Russia's first, say, ASEAN naval exercises as well that they've held, how do you see Russia's role in Indonesia in particular?
Well, we do have bilateral ties, especially military ties with Russia, a good one, in fact. But most of the time, where we looked at our most priority concerns and an immediate interest, especially strategic ones that lies in South China Sea, that lies in the Indian Ocean, there's a lot less to do with our relationship with Russia. So there's a lot of there's not a lot of things that we can work there in terms of just these strategic areas. But again, in terms of bilateral ties, there's a lot more to be done with Russian colleagues. It's just that at the moment where attention is heading, there's not a lot that we can go for with Russia. But even the country holds strategic importance to certain issues that Indonesia cares about in the region, such as Myanmar. That's, I think, where the cooperation lies with Russia, because of Russia's relationship with the junta regime in Myanmar, for example. So that's where we can work with major countries that are a bit further in terms of proximity, geographical proximity.
True. All the sensitivities in Indonesia, in ASEAN, in Southeast Asia emanate from China. How does the Indonesian government and the Indonesian analysts like you and people actually view China's behavior?
Well, I think I mean I can only speak from an analyst perspective because I'm outside the government, right? We do see a lot of concerns with the aggressive behaviors in China, whether it was systematic or incidents, right? Because in fact, in the geopolitical terms, in the actual terms, they do have consequence on the ground with increasing incidents with our ships, increasing incidents within the exclusive economic zones of our countries. So that's where the concern lies. But in terms of our systematic response, we do see China as a strategic partner, especially in these 2 years in the pandemic, with how probably even 80% of our vaccines going from China, I think, and a lot of ties, a lot of aids, a lot of incoming investments from China. We do see a lot of this connecting dots between the economic sector and the security sectors, and we're really trying to be careful about how we trade forward with this balance. So that's where the anxiety lies with our relationship with China.
And how do you see organizations, even if they're structurally still fluid, like the Quad?
Well, I think from the Indonesian position, like the Quad, I mean, there's a lot of emphasis. Even in the speech from Blinken, that the Quad is actually complementary to regional efforts like ASEAN and its mechanisms. But in fact, we haven't seen a lot of that yet. And I think the exclusive, I think, nature of the grouping is what gives countries like Indonesia some hesitance as to what to do with it. So we can only hope that it will bring complementarity with existing mechanisms that we've built for this small middle power collective, like the ASEAN grouping, that the multilateral nature of it, that brings comfort to countries like Indonesia. If there's a lot more work between Quad and ASEAN, a lot more harmony there, I think Indonesia would be a lot more comfortable with, be it for the Quad or initiative like AUKUS, things like that. If there's a lot more complementarity, otherwise it would just signal that the world is getting into that block competition again. An exclusive clubs versus another exclusive clubs. So that would be the concern for Indonesia.
Mohammed Waffaa, Kharisma, absolute pleasure having you on StratNews Global for the first time, and hopefully not the last time. We'll keep inviting you to get your views from Indonesia. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, and look forward to be here again.
And just a reminder to our viewers, do subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. And if you have, then spread the word about us with your professional and personal friends. This is The Gist on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.